Om Namo Narayanaaya. Om Namo Narayanaaya.
Asmadgurubhyo namaha, Asmadparamagurubhyo namaha, Asmadsarvagurubhyo namaha. So we're continuing on with greatness of Saranagati, and we were about to look at the angas of property. So let's have a look at that right now. So the angas or accessories of Saranagati. The practice of Saranagati requires certain preconditions or angas, right? Of course, that's not exactly true. All right, the angas are not necessarily preconditions. They could also be post-conditions. The Vadagalai Sampradaya, the Deshika Sampradaya, they look at these as preconditions. And the Tengalai Sampradaya or the followers of Piralokacharya Manavala Mamuni, they look at them as post-conditions. So, according to Aribudnya Samhita, and we can also say Lakshmi Tantra, there are 6 angas, actually 5 angas and 1 angi. So there is Saranagati itself, and it has 5 sections or 5 accessories, or 5 parts to it. And they are as follows: Anukulyasya Sankalpa, Pratikulyasya Varjana, Rakshishyati Vishvaso, Goptritva Varnam Tada, or that should be Tata, I think. Atmanikshepa Karpanye, Shad Vida Sharanagatihi. The angas are Anukulyasya Sankalpa, Pratikulyasya Varjana, Karpanyam, Vishvasam, Goptritva Varnam, Atmanikshepa. Okay, so Atmanikshepa itself is property or Saranagati or Nyasa Vidya or Varanyasa, whatever you want to call it, right? That is property, right? Atmanikshepa. The other 5 are considered its angas. Out of these, the first 5 are angas, and the last one, namely Atmanikshepa, is the angi, or the whole, which is equivalent to Saranagati. This is the reason why Saranagati is called Saranga Yoga. Saranga Yoga means the process of getting back in touch with into contact with the Supreme Lord, yoga, joining, and Saranga meaning with 6 parts to it. The entire process of Saranagati and its angas is comparable to the Astanga Yoga of Patanjali. So you can notice that Astanga means the yoga of 8 steps. Saranga Yoga is the yoga of 6 steps. So Patanjali's yoga is famous. It's the 8-step yoga. So the Astanga Yoga of Patanjali consists of 8 steps: Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Jnana, and Samadhi. The last stage, Samadhi, is the Angi, and the rest are called Angas. Right. So it is named after Astanga Yoga because it consists of 7 Anga. It is named Astanga Yoga because it consists of 7 Angas and 1 Angi. So also Saranagati is called Saranga Yoga because it comprises of 5 Angas and 1 Angi. The term yoga means sambandha, or joining together. What does the yoga aim at joining? Yoga aims at communion of the Jivatman with the Paramatman, right? So the soul with God. Both Astanga and Saranga Yoga ultimately aim at this endeavor. Therefore, they are rightly called as yogas. However, depending upon the number of steps involved in their procedure, Bhakti is called Astanga Yoga and Saranagati is called Saranga Yoga. And there's a footnote here, which we'll see at the end of the page. Saranagati cannot be complete and total in absence of even one of the angas. Well, that's his idea. Let us discuss the various steps involved in Saranga Yoga of Saranagati as stated by Piralokacharya and Vedanta Deshika. Piralokacharya says that these 5 stages or angas for doing Saranagati, that is, these 5 stages automatically emerge after doing Saranagati by the Prapana. Right, as I said, they are post-requisites, not prerequisites. And there's another there's another footnote here, 39, which we'll see at the end of the chapter, perhaps. Anukulyasya sankalpa or anukulya sankalpa and pratikulya varjanam. Pilalokacharya says that anukulyam means priyatvam, or being lovable to God. Further, he says, so anukulyasya sankalpa means basically, sankalpa means the divine will of God, and means following that, following the will of God or following the orders of God given in the scriptures, right? Pratikulyasya means rejecting that which is against the order of God. Okay, so further he says that as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, that one who shows bhakti towards God, to that person, personal God, will show, to that person, God will show his love, which means he must be ananya prayojanam, or one who seeks God only as beneficiary without other benefits. According to Vedanta Deshika, the association of the aspirant with God results in the negation of egoism and thereby seeks the Lord's redemption. Subsequently, the aspirant cultivates his pure sattvic nature and believes that he lives only for the satisfaction of God. This belief in God would help him to mold his character. Then he decides to do only that which pleases God and avoids things that displease God. In this context, Rahasyatraya Saram states that the aspirant, through his sheshatva or servitude, knowledge, realizes that the jagat or world consisting of jivas or souls and ajivas or insentient, chit and achit meaning insentient things like stones and tree, whatever, stones and the like, which constitute the sharira or the body of God, and so he determines the course of actions which is agreeable to all. Okay, karpanya. Karpanya, which is a third anga of Saranagati, otherwise called helplessness, helps to invoke God's mercy. In the state of helpless conditions, there must be a total annihilation of I, or the sense of egoism. This stage makes the aspirant to believe that God is the only resort. Then he clings to God for his peace and protection. Thus, helplessness of the aspirant invokes God's mercy and secures redemption for him. Mahavishvasa. It is the fourth most important anga of Saranagati. Pilalokacharya says that exercising with so much of faith without Sankatrayam, 3 doubts, on Bhagavad Gunas. Sankatrayam means 3 doubts. Upaya pala gunatvam, right? Udesha dhulabatvam, and swakrut dosha darshanam. Vedanta Deshika says that it is nothing but complete and absolute faith in the saving grace of the Lord. Saranagati is to be motivated by having supreme faith or Mahavishvasham in the redemptive grace of the Lord. Even the slightest doubt regarding the efficacy of Saranagati will lead to collapse the basic structure of Saranagati like a pack of cards. I think he means like a house of cards, not a pack of cards. Thus, Mahavishvash saves the aspirant from dangers and anxieties. Further, Lakshmi Tantra states that by practicing Mahavishvasha, the grace of the Lord will protect, arises from the performance of the desired upaya. Upaya means the means. God himself is the means in property, as well as the goal. Goptritva Varnam, or Goptritva Varnam. This is the 5th required anga of Saranagati. Pilalokacharya says that Goptritva Varna means the negation of sins that results to attain the liking by taking God as an inseparable means. According to Vedanta Deshika, though moksha is an ultimate goal of life, it is not easy to attain like other objects. Mere prayer alone will not fetch moksha. One should try hard and yearn for it. Without asking or repeating again and again, no good things will be given. Okay, so this is Vedanta Deshika's idea. This is not the idea of the Southern School of Sri Vaishnavism, right? And neither is it the idea given to us in the Ramacharma Sloka, where he says, Lord Rama says, Sakvideva Papannaya, once only. One can say, Tavasmiti, I am yours, and he'll be saved. If the aspirant cannot ask repeatedly again and again, moksha cannot be granted by God. Okay, so that's Vedanta Deshika's idea. Lakshmi Tantra observes, no protection would be granted when it is not sought. Okay, that is an opinion. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so the above 5 angas that are to be practiced regularly to realize Atmanikshepa or Sharanagati, which is the angi, right? Which is actually property. Lokacharya means that by surrender, his English is not very good here. Lokacharya means that by surrendering all responsibilities of the Atma and its things like Sharira or body to God. That doesn't make any sense. That sentence just doesn't make any sense. In other words, Atmeya Mana Nikila Bara Samarpanam, right? Bara Samarpanam means placing the burden of one's sins at the feet of God or surrendering those to God. Vedanta Deshika says that the self-surrender invariably follows faith, invariably follows with supreme faith in receiving the grace of God. This supreme faith will lead to the self-offering up to the Lord. The protection from the Lord will be extended only to those who have surrendered the entire responsibilities, including his own self, to the Lord. This is called Swarupa Samarpanam, or surrendering oneself to the Lord. So, it's actually better if we read I thought that this book would be good. It would summarize the path of property and everything like that. But in fact, he's making it a little bit more difficult to understand. It's better to if you want to understand Vedanta Deshika, it's better to read Rahasyatraya Saram. And if you want to understand the Pilalokacharya Manavalamani Muni, it's better to read Mumukshapati, their direct words, than to read his explanation, because he keeps giving the opinions of both, and sometimes the opinions differ slightly. So he's, although we can't say that they don't differ that much, but anyway, he's giving both sides' opinions here. Further, Vedanta Deshika has explained these angas of Sharanagati distinctly to call Sharanagati as yoga. Of the 5 angas, Anukulya Sankalpa and Pratikuli Varjana bring the aspirant to avoid all displeasures to God. Karpanya, right? So that was following the scriptural injunctions or orders of God and rejecting things which are against his orders, are the first 2. And then Karpanya, helplessness, brings the aspirant to believe that there's no other way than God. Mahavishvas, or great faith, provides the aspirant with the complete faith in God. Though through Goptritvavarnam, the redemptive grace of the Lord is revealed, and it saves the aspirant from the clutches of bondage. Thus, each anga plays a definite role in molding the aspirant as a yogi, and Sharanagati as a yoga for easy practice. Okay, so let's have a look at the angas in some examples. The angas of Sharanagati. So, in the Ramayana, the classic example that illustrates the angas of Sharanagati, in Trijata's episode of the Ramayana, can be taken as a classical example to illustrate the angas of Sharanagati. In the kingdom of Ravana, when Sita was surrounded by lady Rakshasas, and in the Ashokavana, and began to accuse her, Trijata, the daughter of Vibhishana, the Rakshasa leader, formed against them and said, "Enough of your cruel words." I'm not exactly sure here. Sita was surrounded by lady Rakshasas and began to accuse her. Trijata, the daughter of Vibhishana, the Rakshasa leader, formed against them and said, "Enough of your cruel words." Hence, Trijata's words are exhortation to avoid displeasure to the soul. This is the fundamental principle of Pratikuli Sivarjana, which is the second anga of Sharanagati. Trijata's advice to use only conciliatory language is suggestive of being disposed to do things that will please God, is implicative of the anga called anukulyasya sankalpa. Again, Trijata's warning, terrible dread has indeed befallen the Rakshasas from Rama, reveals the other state of anga, that is karpanya, or utter helplessness. Trijata again declares, let us request Sita to protect us. Though all are threatened, though all, I guess, have threatened her before, beg of her now, O Rakshasis, do not ask whether she will protect us. Such talks are vain. This utterance reveals the prayer for seeking protection, which is Goptritva Varnam, another important anga of Saranagati. The self-surrender, or Atmanikshepa, is revealed by the statement, Sita, the King Janaka's daughter, is surely bent on showering her graciousness to those who do her obeisance. The word obeisance in the above statement implies the anga of Saranagati. The angi of Saranagati, obeisance, means to surrender to the person. Thus, we can see in Trijata's episode a demonstration of the angas of Saranagati as outlined in the Ramayana. This is the reason for calling the Ramayana as the golden bedrock of Nyasa Brahma Vidya, or Saranagati Vidya, the process of surrender. Bharanyasa, more complete and absolute surrender. Vedanta Deshika explained Saranagati by drawing a comparison. He said that when a desired object is beyond the limits of one's endeavor, then one must seek a suitable means for attaining it. Similarly, to attain moksha, one must adopt a suitable means, namely Saranagati, or placing the entire responsibility on God. It is declared in Saranagati with specific thoughts like, this object should be accomplished by me, for me, by you, without making any effort of my own. This self-surrender of placing the burden on God requires a supreme faith, or mahavishwas, in obtaining the grace of the Lord. Then only it is possible for one to place the entire responsibilities on God. This is called complete self-surrender, or bharanyasa. Here one must remember a fact that an aspirant has no independence either to perform Saranagati or attaining fruits from it. Here, he should realize that he is just a part of God and belongs to him only. God is always merciful towards the suffering souls, and it becomes necessary for the jiva, for the soul, individual soul, to adopt an upaya, or a means to get liberation. It is said that surrendering oneself to God is just like someone surrenders a jewel belonging to another to that person himself. Due to ignorance, the jiva claims possession of everything. When realization dawns on the jiva, or the individual soul, that he is totally dependent on God, he overcomes his egoism. At that time, the aspirant says, I am surrendering this self to you, O Lord, right? Which is verily your property alone. This surrender, or placing the whole responsibilities on the lotus feet of God, is called bharanyasa. It's interesting to know that in Rahasya Trayasara, Vedanta Deshika classifies bharanyasa into three categories. They are Swarupa Samarpanam, which we already saw, right? Swarupa Samarpanam means offering oneself, very self. Bhara Samarpanam, offering one's sinful reactions, all of one's sinful reactions, and Pala Samarpana, offering the result of surrender, or the result of all one's actions, to the Lord. It is necessary to know the complete nature of all these factors in a phased manner. Swarup Samarpanam. The jiva, or the individual soul, must come to the realization that he is only a servitude, or a servant, sheshatva, to God. He belongs to him, and his very being exists in him. And most importantly, he is dependent on him for everything. Lakshmi Tantra also underlines this in sloka 79 of the 17th chapter. When he forgoes the feeling of I or ego and offers his self to God, it is called Swarupa Samarpanam. Now, what is Barasamarpanam? Barasamarpanam. The Baranyasa plays a vital role in the process of self-surrender. The jiva must place all his responsibilities, including his protection, to the Lord. Also, he must come to the stage of thinking that he cannot live even a fraction of a second without the guidance of God. In that stage, he must place wholeheartedly all his responsibilities on the Lord, on God, who is both Siddha and Sadhya. Siddha means the perfection of the goal, and Sadhya means the method of attaining the goal, Sadhya, like that, the unattained goal of endeavors. This reminds us of the saying in Lakshmi Tantra Sloka of chapter 17, verse 79. This is called Barasamarpanam. Well, that was a very convoluted way of saying just to surrender all the actions and reactions of one's good and bad deeds to the Lord. Palasamarpanam. This is a third aspect of Paranyasa. In this state of Saranagati or surrender, the prapana, the person who's surrendering, the refugee at the feet of the Lord, must forget all his desires of protection and feel that he is part and parcel of God. He must believe that he lives for the sake of God and to implement his commands. He must annihilate the feelings of I and we and think in terms of me and us. The only objective of an aspirant is to serve God and have no concern of the result of his self-surrender. This kind of surrendering of self, responsibilities, and the consequences of the fruits of his actions at the feet of the Lord is called Palasamarpanam. This Saranagati involves three important aspects: Swarupa Samarpanam, Barasamarpanam, Palasamarpanam. Well, we just discussed that, so I don't know why he's repeating it. So these constitute the ingredient factors of the very concept of Saranagati. Okay. Requirements of Saranagati. Saranagati is easy to practice and is open to all, irrespective of caste, creed, color, or gender, with supreme faith in Lord Narayana. But it has to fulfill certain required conditions. These conditions may be one or combination of many of the following. A, when the aspirant is not able to practice other sadhanas such as karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga. B, when the aspirant does not possess the knowledge of the shastras relating to upasanas or methods of worship. C, birth is not the criteria for performing Saranagati. And D, inability to bear any delay in attaining moksha. Right, so he's talking about specific types of moksha. Specific types of property, because there's different types of artha property and dripta property. Most people, they perform what's called dripta property. They're able to wait till the end of life until reaching moksha. But there are people who don't want to wait, and they're called artha prapanas. They do artha property. They want to die itself right now and attain moksha. Okay, the special requisite to be adopted in the practice of Saranagati are special requisites. A, the prapana must know thoroughly the relationship between the jivatman or the individual soul and the paramatman God. This is the shesha sheshi bhava, right? The relationship between master and servant, or servant, shesha sheshi, shesha, servant, master, shesha sheshi. Right. B, akinchanyam, which means no other source of sadhana. C, ananya gatitvam, which means God is only a means that is the only means other than any other way. Is the only means. Okay. Hence, we may draw the conclusion that Saranagati is for such people, that Saranagati is for such people who have faith and who cannot follow the sadhana of bhakti yoga because of their lack of knowledge of shastras. It also indicates that Saranagati is the only alternative to bhakti yoga and assures to attain God to one and all without any restriction or reservation. It brings desired fruits very quickly without any opposition. Another crucial point to bear in mind regarding Saranagati is that it should be practiced only once along with its angas by taking utmost care and devotion. The second time performance of Saranagati is not accepted by the scriptures. It is compared to a clever archer who shoots the arrow at the target only once. In Mundaka Upanishad, the idea that the soul, about the soul to be installed in God is described as follows. The syllable Om is the bow. The soul is the arrow. Brahman is target, or Brahman, the supreme, is target. So one must aim at God with greatest care and devotion. To practice it, one must have wholehearted commitment in doing so. That is why Saranagati is compared to a Brahmastra, which means a weapon of great power, which will not tolerate the adoption of other sadhanas along with it. It is said in Arhibudnya Samhita that a person who takes to the path of Saranagati achieves the fruits of all tapas, all sorts of penance, sacrifices, pilgrimages, gifts, in other words, charity, and attains salvation easily without resorting to any other methods. This shows the greatness of Saranagati over the other sadhanas. Types of Saranagati. So now we're going to talk about different types of Saranagati. The important types of Saranagati are as follows: Ukti Nishta, Acharya Nishta, Swanishtha, Artha Prapati, and Dripta Prapati. So Ukti Nishta. This is a kind of Saranagati practiced by those aspirants who do not have the knowledge of the angas of Saranagati. But they have firm faith, they have firm belief that they can attain liberation only through the Lord. They're also fully convinced that God will grant moksha or mukti, liberation, by offering their prayers to him. All they have to do is to pronounce before the Lord, before God, the words of Saranagati in the manner taught by their acharyas. In other words, may you take upon yourself the burden of protecting me. The utterance of words of Saranagati is most efficacious. This is like surrender of an ignorant prince to an emperor with the utterance of words which his nurses taught to him. Just as a poor illiterate boy who does not know the force of the appeal of his utterances, that is, bhavati bhiksham dehi, when the brahmacharis go around to the houses and they say bhavati bhiksham dehi, oh mother, to the lady of the house, please give me alms, right? And gets a favorable response at the doors of good men. So also mere words in praise of the Lord will lead to Saranagati, though the aspirant does not understand the subtlety of them, as scriptures are clothed in the Sanskrit language. This means that if one can converse to God in the most sincere and fervent manner, it will definitely invoke God's blessings and affections. Ramanuja echoes the same thought in his Saranagati Gadyam, which is his prose work on surrender, part of the Gadyatrayam, the three prose works. Whatever may be the method or form, you have uttered the Dvaya mantra. The Dvaya mantra, again, Sriman Narayana Charano Sharam Pavajeshmate Narayanaya Namaha, which is the Saranagati mantra. Your redemption is my responsibility. So that is Ukti Nishta. So then Acharya Nishta, Sri Vaishnava gives utmost importance. Sri Vaishnavism gives utmost importance to the service of the acharyas or the teachers. It considers service to the acharya to be service to God. Tilalok Acharya extremely discussed about the Acharya Nishta in his Srivachana Bhushanam. If anybody's interested in Srivachana Bhushanam, they can look on this YouTube channel and they can find a discussion of Srivachana Bhushanam by myself, where I go through Srivachana Bhushanam and explain it like that. It's also available on some other websites, but I'm doing it in modern Western English, and some other people doing it in Tamil and other languages. Maybe there might also be a discussion in English of Srivachana Bhushanam on foil.org. We may note down some of the tenets here. So here we're talking about Acharya Nishta property. By approaching Ishvara, or the Supreme Lord, is like one who requests him by holding his hands to get the things done. By approaching the Acharya is like holding the feet of the Acharya, that is prostrating to him and getting the things done definitely. So there's a difference between Swanishtha, Ukti Nishta and And Uktinishta and Acharyanishta is one can pray himself, or he can approach the Acharya, simply request the teacher to do the property for him, to pray on his behalf. So he further says that the Acharya is helping both Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, and his disciple. So the Acharya works like a mediator, like Sri Devi, like Lakshmi Devi. Acharya helps Ishvara by introducing a Shesha, or disciple, or servant. Acharya helps this disciple by showing his relationship with the Sheshi, or God, the Master. Elaborating on the sutra, I.e. Says that the Lord, who is creating the universe more and more to get a good Samaritan, Shesha, or servant, his attempt fulfills. Then Acharya introduces Shesha, his disciple, who is like Sri Kaustuba, the gem, right, which the Lord wears on his chest, and likes by God, and who is Sharira to God, the body of God, and who is submerged in samsara, the wheel of birth and death here in this material world, uplifts him, and by learning his sin, hands him over to the Lord. The Acharya is doing this. Likewise, Acharya helps the disciples by eradicating his ignorance, etc., and showing him the relationship of God as Shesha, as Sheshi, the master, and him, the Jivatman, as Shesha, the servant. This is the help of the Acharya to the Shesha, or the servant. Further, I.e. says that this is like a blind man who gets his vision and also helps him to get treasure. Okay. Hence, the Lord also desired to become an Acharya in Krishna avatar, where he spoke the Bhagavad Gita, where he preached the Bhagavad Gita Charma Sloka, which is the 18th chapter, 66th verse, Sarvadamam Pritita Mami Kamsharambaja, Aham Tva Sarvapapidyo Mokshishami Masutaha, to his ardent disciple, Arjuna, and in the Rama Avatara, when he came as Lord Rama, to a disciple Vashishta, Rama preached Charma Sloka to Vibhishana, called Abhaya Pradhanam, right? So there's another book by Vedanta called Abhaya Pradhana Saram on this same YouTube channel. You can go and you can find lectures by Dr. Tirunarayana, Dr. R. Tirunarayana on Abhaya Pradhana Saram, the book of Vedanta Deshika, explaining the Bhishana Saranagati, or property, or surrender to Lord Rama. And the Charma Sloka of Lord Rama is Sakrideva Prapannaya Tavasmiti Chayachite Abhayam Sarvbhutebhyo Tadam Yetad Vatam Mama. That. So these two, he came as Krishna and Rama to speak these ultimate orders of and explanations of property. To such an Acharya who helped the disciple, one cannot equalize in submitting two Nitya Vibhutis and two Leela Vibhutis and two Ishwaras, who, if one can create as a token of his help. Okay, so that sentence to me makes absolutely no sense. So one of the problems of this book is that the person doesn't know English very well, and he needs somebody to edit the book for him. Further, Pillai Lokacharya says that the relationship Shesha Sheshi, or servant to master, Sambandha means association, or it's the same as yoga, joining together, of God, is common to get one into samsara according. Well, it should be get one out of samsara according to karma, and get one as a mukta by showing kripa or grace, whereas the relationship acharya shishya sambandha between the teacher and the student of the teacher, acharya, is a cause of redeeming from samsara and to get moksha. Okay, so what is he trying to say here? He says, further, Pillai Lokacharya says that the relationship Shesha Sheshi Sambandha, so between the servant and the master, right, is common to get one into samsara according to karma. I don't know what that means, right? That he's saying here, Pillai Lokacharya says that if you look at it as God and the soul as being the servant of God, then that gets you into this material world. I don't agree with that at all. This is not understandable at all, this English. And get one as a mukta by showing kripa get one as a liberated person by showing kripa, by showing grace. Whereas the relationship between the teacher and the student, right, of the teacher is the cause of redeeming from samsara to get moksha. Continuing on, the help rendered by God is great, as he enlightened a good acharya to his disciple. He sent a good acharya to his disciple and enlightened that acharya. Hence, God's help is greater than the acharya. I'm not understanding that point. Likewise, this is under the heading of acharya nishta property, right? So why is he saying that God's help is greater than that of the acharya? Okay, likewise, in several sutras, Pilalokacharya highlights the greatness of the acharya in his Srivachanabhushanam. Correct. He finally establishes in the sutra that acharya abhimana uttarakam, which means that the acharya's grace will enlighten the three states of sheshatva swarupam, upayam, which should be upayam, right? Upayam, right? Sheshatva swarupam is the swarupa, or the understanding that one is a servant, right? Upayam means understanding who the means is. The means is the Lord himself. He's the means. And Purushartha is the goal. The goal is also the Lord, right? As derived from the Tiru mantra. And he's giving some quote there, but he's not explaining how that's derived from Tiru mantra. According to Guru Parampara Prabhavam, which is another book about the lineages of Sri Vaishnavas, Yamunacharya, the grand guru of Ramanujacharya, prayed to his acharya Manakal Nambi before he attains moksha. Okay, so basically everybody is praying to their acharya before they attain moksha. Ramanuja prayed to his acharya Yamunacharya. Actually, Ramanuja's acharya, in one sense, Yamunacharya is the guru of Ramanuja, but he's a Shiksha guru. His actual Diksha guru or Guru for Pancha Samskara was Nambi, the disciple of, or Mahapurna, the disciple of Yamunacharya, before he attains moksha. Right. This is a glorious example of Acharya Nishta. Okay, so here above he's tried to explain Acharya Nishta in a very bad way, right? So if you want to understand it, I suggest you read the actual books of the Acharyas, the Rahasya Granthas, which if you want to look at videos on Mamukshapati by Dr. Alwar, or also discussions on Mamukshapati by myself, or Srivachanabhushana by Pilalokacharya, discussions on that also by myself, or if you want to understand some of the other Rahasya Granthas of Vedanta Deshika, you can also look on several playlists about that on this YouTube channel, like that. It'll be explained in a much more understandable way. In Acharya Nishta, service to Acharya is more important rather than the service to God. Okay, so that's correct. Right. So in Acharya Nishta, the person who's the prapana, who's the surrendered person, who's the disciple, who's the student, right? The one who wants to attain moksha, mukshu, right? That person puts more effort into serving his acharya than he does into serving God. And maybe only exclusively serves the acharya. He doesn't know how to serve God. That is called Acharya Nishta property. Okay, so the acharya, his initiation will help the aspirant to discard what is to be detested and pursue what is desirable. That would be Padikulisa Vajana and Anukulisa Sankalpa. The acharya is the link between the prapana, the refugee, and the paramatma. So he's the linking port position there, right? The mediator. He lights the torch of wisdom of his disciple and sees that it burns continuously. The acharya's great trait is his concern for prapana's well-being and eagerness with which he will enable him to have peeps into mysticism. Okay, I don't know what he means exactly by peeps into mysticism. Anyway, but he's enlightening his disciples like all teachers do. The acharya is interested in saving the disciple, whereas the Lord is both a judge and a savior. When the acharya or the teacher did Saranagati or property or surrender at the feet of the Lord, which also includes the protection of his disciples, the Sandilya Smriti cites this type of Saranagati where acharya, the acharya or the teacher, has to introduce before the Lord and to say that he considers the disciple as his son, servant, and his disciple who has to be saved. The prapana, or the refugee at the feet of the Lord, can repay his debt of gratitude to his acharya through his services, which cannot be adequately compensated by clinging to the rules set by him and upholding the traditions. In acharya nishta, right, with great faith for the acharya, there is a guarantee of fruits of Saranagati, the fruits of Saranagati being moksha, for liberation, when the acharya is delighted with the loyal service of his disciple. When the aspirant follows acharya nishta, becomes intimately tied up with his acharya and he gets saved. Because the acharya has done properly, the acharya is saved, and by surrendering to the acharya, the disciple becomes saved. The aspirant becomes saved just for the reason that he is the acharya's disciple. In his Rahasyatraya Sara, Vedanta Deshika reiterates the statement of Mudlayanda, who was one of the great important disciples of Ramanujacharya. Right. He says, when a lion leaps from one mountain to another, because he's very powerful, he can leap from one hill to another, along with insects, not inspects, but insects that cling to his body, the disciples of Ramanuja also saved when Ramanuja performs Saranagati. Okay, so this is a theory of some people. They say that when the acharya does property, the acharya is saved, and therefore we are saved along with him if we just simply serve the acharya. Some people say that Ramanuja did Saranagati, he did property for all of us, so nobody else has to do property. They just have to surrender to Ramanuja and have some connection with Ramanuja. Okay, but Ramanuja didn't teach that, and that's not really what it's all about. But some people say that. Okay, so this quotation reveals the idea that those who are connected with a prapana, a person, a refugee, will be surely saved by the blessings of the acharya who did Saranagati. Vedanta Deshika too elaborates this idea in his Nyasa Tilakam. So he has a book called Nyasa Tilakam. Just as a blind man is led by one who is not blind, and a lame man is taken in a boat across a river by a boatman, and the children of the servant of the king enjoy all the pleasures of the palace, even though they do not know the king. Likewise, the disciples of the acharya are sure to attain God through their association with their acharyas. Of these examples, the first one explains the Ukti Nishta, in which there is an effort on the aspirant, but there is no knowledge. He works in the association with another who possesses the eye of knowledge. The second and third examples are demonstrations of Acharya Nishta, in which there is a knowledge, but the effort is absent, like that. So we're talking about the first two examples given here is one, the blind man being led by another blind man, right? Or perhaps it's a lion jumping over from one mountain to another with insects on his back. Then the blind man being led by another blind man, and then finally a boatman. Oh no, so I'm sorry. Right, a blind man being led by another blind man. A person being taken in a boat across a river, who's lame, who can't walk, and the children of the servants of the king enjoying the pleasures of the palace. These are the three examples. So he's saying here that of these examples, the first one, which is the blind leading the sighted leading the blind person, is the example of Ukti Nishta, in which it is the effort of the aspirant, but there is no knowledge. The works in association. He works in association with another who possesses the eye of knowledge. Okay, so that's the sighted person leading the blind person. The second and third examples of the lame person being taken by the boatman across the river in the boat, and the children of the servants of the king enjoying in the palace, right, in which there is knowledge, but the effort is absent, right? So there's no effort by a person. when a sighted person takes a blind person and leads him somewhere, the blind person still has to walk. Whereas if the person cannot walk and he's taken in a boat, then there's no effort by him. And also there's no effort by the children of there's no effort in the children of servants of the king to enjoy in the palace, because they just naturally enjoy because the servant of the king is living there also. So the second and third examples are demonstrations of Acharyanishta, in which there is knowledge, but the effort is absent. With the efforts of the boatman and the king of a palace, the layman and the children of a servant get their desired results respectively. Thus it is said that the aspirant following the path of Saranagati, all that is necessary is to stick firmly to the attitude of absolute dependence on God, associated with a sense of absolute helplessness. He has no efforts to make other than to keep himself in a prayerful mood. All the other things are done by God. Even according to Ahirbunya Samhita, Saranagati or surrender is upaya jnana, or knowledge of the means, and not an upaya by itself. It's simply the knowledge of the means. Saranagati of surrender is not actually a means by itself. The Lord is the means. It is upaya jnana. It is knowledge of the means. It is a mental attitude and does not require any action whatsoever. It is like a boat on which an aspirant merely sits, while it is the work of the boatman to do the rest, the boatman being God himself. So there's a text which says, etc., like that. So he doesn't give any translation of that. Now we're going to talk about Swanishtha. So what did we talk about before? We talked about Uktinishta, right? Compared to a sighted person leading a blind person. Acharyanishta, where the person is simply surrendering to the Acharya. And now we have Swanishtha. According to Pillai Lokacharya, Swanishtha means that one who obtains Panchasamskar from an Acharya receives the knowledge of the sutras, or the Shastras, let's say, the sutras relating to property and Saranagati. Then, by the benign grace of the Acharya, he will seek God as a means and to do kainkarya or service to him, to the Supreme Lord. This kind of property is called Swanishtha. Here, the aspirant, who has the true knowledge of Jivatman, Paramatman, and the Parama Purushartha, right? Jivatman means the individual soul, Paramatman means God, and Parama Purushartha means moksha, or the ultimate goal of life, may himself seek God and perform Saranagati independently, right? This kind of Saranagati is called Swanishtha. So if you know the philosophy, if you understand everything like this, you can go to an Acharya, the Acharya can perform the Panchasamskara, you understand what's going on, and you seek to work and to serve God independent, not really independently, but somewhat independently. That is called Swanishtha, having faith in one's own ability to do the surrender. The aspirant who approaches God directly for his moksha is also called Swanishtha. Hence, one who has the necessary knowledge as well as the mode of performance are qualifications to perform Swanishtha Saranagati. So what is the qualifications for doing this type of property or surrender? Is that he has to have the knowledge, he has to understand the process, right? As well as the mode of performance, right? This is the point. So he has to have theoretical doctrinal knowledge, and he has to know practically how to do it. So now we have Artha property and Dripta property, right? So what did we talk about before? We talked about Ukti Nishta, we talked about Charya Nishta, now we talked about Swanishta, and now we're going to talk about Artha property and Dripta property. So Pillai Lokacharya lucidly narrates property or Saranagati in his text Artha Panchagam. Artha Panchagam is a division into 5 sections of so many different things, like that. These are 2. They are Ati Rupa property and Dripta Rupa property. Right. So what does it mean? One can practice Shastras which he endowed by the grace of God, and he obtains Upadesh or instruction from the Acharya or the teacher. Then he gets real knowledge. He feels that his body is an obstacle for the experience of God. The material body is an obstacle to going to God, to going to liberation or moksha. Likewise, he feels the living place and relationship with the acharya. Then, to have experience of God in isolation by seeking the desha, the place, the body, and the acharya, he will perform complete Saranagati. Namawa is a forerunner who exclaimed Tiruvenkatanatha, right, means the Lord of the Tiruvenkata Hills, Lord Balaji, Lord Venkateshwara, as follows with intense bhakti in attaining moksha. So he said as follows, right, and did in Tiruvaimoli 6.10.10. I'm pretty sure he's talking about Tiruvaimoli 6.10.10 here. He's giving a quotation. And did Saranagati as follows. Venkaturaya Varuku Namaha 336. That's also probably from Tiruvaimoli. He further cross-questioning the Lord for not showing his grace to take him away from samsara in the following hymns. Tiruvaimoli 698, Tiruvaimoli 699, Tiruvaimoli 10.10.1, Tiruvaimoli 10.10.2, Tiruvaimoli 537, Perialwa Tirumoli 537, and Tirumangai Alwar's Tirumoli 186. These are all different quotations we have to look up, and we have to see that what they all have in common is that the Alwars, in this particular sense, Peri Alwar, Tirumangai Alwar, and Nam Alwar, are praying to the Lord that he is not showing grace to them and taking them away from samsara or this material world quickly enough. That's the point. So the above hymns express the different Alwars' intents or arti to reach Paramapadam. So this is artha property, means that a person has such intense desire to reach moksha that he wants to give up his life here itself immediately and be liberated on the spot as soon as he surrenders. That is called artha property. So Pila Lokacharya explains stage by stage Dripta properties Saranagati. So at the end of one's life, disgust and fear at the attainment of Swarga or Naraka will be born. So at the end of somebody's life, you may think, what if I go to heaven to enjoy my pious deeds? And what if I go to hell to suffer for my sinful actions? Like that, I will never reach Sri Vaikuntham. I will never reach the eternal moksha or liberation of the Lord or real salvation. So you get afraid of that at the end of life. To redeem them and to get revelation of God, he has to approach a good acharya, a good teacher. From his initiation, he will seek God as a refuge. He will do property. He will surrender. He will become a refugee, prapana. Then he has to forego from the undoings, and follow the activities as outlined for such castes in the Vedas. Okay, that's according to, especially according to Vedanta Deshika and the Northern School, like that. And to do kind karya of God and his Bhagavatas, his devotees, according to their right, through preaching, worshipping, and meditation. And to know the nature of Ishvara, or God, who is the Sheshi, the master, the instigator, the Swami, the master, the Shariri, the soul of the universe, right? The supporter, the protector, the enjoyer, omniscient means all-knowing, omnipotent, all-powerful, and the universal sovereign, or the king of the whole material creation and spiritual creation. His being modified by all, unequaled and unsurpassed, having all desires materialized and every will realized, and to know the Jivatman, or the individual soul, who is subservient, controlled by, supported by God, the property of God, the body of God, the Sharira of God, and all desired. Having known about the nature of God and the soul, he has to entrust all burdens to God. Right? This is, again, we talked about this, Bara Samarpanam, entrusting all the burdens of his sins to God, and be a non-burdener, right? Have no burdens himself, as Namawa revealed in Tiruvaimoli 588. Hence, this is called Dripta property, explained by Pila Lokacharya. This is when people, they think that we can stay here in this material world to the end of this lifetime, but no more. and therefore we have patience, a little bit of patience before God, and that we have great faith that God will take us at the end of this life to liberation, to salvation. Vedanta Deshika also, so that was basically from Pillai Lokacharya's books, and Vedanta Deshika also elaborately discusses about these two types of property in his Rahasya Trayasaram. They are Artha property and Dripta property. This categorization is dependent on the feeling and urgency felt by the prapana, the refugee, for attaining moksha or salvation. A prapana, or refugee at the feet of the Lord, is one who has followed property or surrender, right, as a sadhana, as a method for attaining moksha or liberation. The prapanas, or the refugees, are classified into Artha prapanas and Dripta prapanas, depending on the intensity of their feelings and urgency for attaining moksha. So as we saw, the Artha prapanas, they want immediately to go to moksha, and they intensely want to attain moksha immediately. They can't wait one more day or one more second, right? Whereas the Dripta prapanas, which is like most people, is they perform property, they seek refuge of the Lord, they worship the Lord, and they perform service to the Lord in this material world until the end of this lifetime, and then they go to salvation. So some prapanas cry for immediate liberation because they cannot brook any delay and separation from God. These prapanas are called Artha prapanas. That's what we said before. The other kind of prapanas request that the Lord to grant moksha at the end of their lifetime or even after death, and they are called Dripta prapanas. Now, this classification gives rise to a question, namely, why should there be a distinction between these prapanas concerning the time of attainment of moksha? The distinction between these prapanas arises due to the differences in their prayers addressed to the Lord, which in turn is due to their parabdha. Parabdha is a type of karma, sukritya, or meritorious deeds in their previous life. So that's what he's saying. So I'm not sure. This may be stated by Vedanta Deshika in Rahasya Trayasaram. I'm not sure where he's getting this from. He gets the happiness of devout worship of the Lord till he gets moksha, as he attains the same happiness of serving the Lord for all time to come. Their being rid, there should be no E here, being rid of all his karmas in moksha. Hence the classification into Artha and Dripta are made depending on the intensity and urgency of the prapana's feeling, but there is absolutely no difference in the nature and enjoyment of moksha for both types of prapanas. So once they attain moksha, once they attain salvation, they've exactly got the same goal. They have attained the same goal. So Pillai Lokacharya and Vedanta Deshika in their works explain the nature and significance of Saranagati in the form of mantras or rahasyas. So that's not actually true. Their books are called Rahasya Granthas, right? They're about the secrets. The word Rahasya means secrets. The secrets are the mantras which are given at Panchasamskara, the Astakshara mantra, the Dvaya mantra, and the Charma sloka, right? And this is going to be explained in the next chapter. So he's going to explain about the actual works of Vedanta Deshika and Pillai Lokacharya. They may be in the case of Pillai Lokacharya, he's writing in Manipavala, a mixture of Sanskrit and Tamil, and he's making sutras or little aphorisms which are commented on by Manavala Mamuni and explained in great detail in his commentary. For Vedanta Deshika is also writing in Manipavalam in many of these Rahasya Granthas or esoteric understandings or esoteric meanings of the three mantras given in Panchasamskara. However, we have to remember that the Panchasamskara is the ceremony of Saranagati or surrender for the southern school, Pillai Lokacharya, Manavala Mamuni, and the Sri Rangamacharyas, called Tengalai Sampradaya. And for the Vadagalai Sampradaya, the followers of Vedanta Deshika, the northern school of the Kanchi Acharyas, Kanchi Puramacharyas, that is not Panchasamskara itself, which occurs in the early part of one's life, or for ladies after marriage, right? After Upanayana for the boys who are Brahmins, and or Kshatriyas or Vaishyas, Traivarnikas, and after marriage for the girls, and at any time in the early life for Sudra males, right? That this is only for Vatagalized, and then later on, at any time when he feels that he wants to do property, the real property for the Vatagalized is the Paranyasa, which we discussed above, like that. So they're two slightly different systems of surrender, like that. But basically the same idea is it has to be done. And whereas they both accept that surrender should be done only once, the Tengalais at the time, and say at the time of Pancha Samskara, and the Vatagalized say at the time of Paranyasa, which may come later in life. Okay, so here are all the references. So we don't have time to go through all the references like that, but they can be looked up. People can look up the references and go through it like that. You could also go to a website called vedaveda.com or .org, I think, vedaveda.org, and you can look up the English translations of all the Alwar's hymns which were quoted in this particular lesson, lecture, like that. So he's quoted a lot here. So next time we'll start on chapter 4, 3 supreme mantras or rahasyas or secrets for implying Saranagati. So unfortunately, that chapter 3, was very badly written in English, and he doesn't quite get across his meaning in some places. Okay, and also I would have another criticism of it, that he tries to blend the ideas of Vedanta Deshika and Pilalokacharya together, whereas they have slightly different understandings. So in order to really understand this, you need to study for Vedanta Deshika, study his Rahasya Granthas. He has 18, and so does Pilalokacharya has 18. So the main ones for Pilalokacharya are Mumukshapadi, Srivachanabhushanam, and maybe, if you want to get more into it, the Acharya Hridayam, which is by his younger brother, Alagiya Peramal, Alagiya Manavala Peramal Nayana. But for Vedanta Deshika, the main work is Rahasyatraya Saram, but he also has Chilaraya Hasan, some small other books which are also important on the esoteric meaning of the 3 mantras, like that. So all these books should be studied directly. I'm attempting to get lectures on all of them up on this YouTube channel so people can see them like that. So there's quite a lot of it up there already. And if you want to see the direct words of these acharyas and their direct explanations, which will be slightly different in certain instances, you have to really study those lectures. So anything else before we go? Any other? I know that you're tired. You must be wanting to take rest.
Yeah, sorry. No. As I said, it's just amazing that this whole process of being a Prapanam and all these. Many times you think that Patanjali Ashtang and other aspects are different and separate from Bhakti. Well, should I say the Nari Bhakti Yoga, but the whole process of Sharanagati, and Prapati. But it's quite amazing to see the correlation between Vaishnavism and the other schools interlinking, as noted initially,
Yeah, some things are accepted from other schools. If you really want to see the contrast between different forms of Vaishnavism, not just the different schools in Sri Vaishnavism, but the different schools of Vaishnavism, then the different schools of Vedanta, then the different schools of Indian philosophy, you really have to do a comparative study. There's a book called Indian Philosophical Systems by S.M.S. Chari. It's based on a book by Vedanta Deshika called Paramattha Bhanga. And Paramattha Bhanga he'll go through all the different sects and all the different philosophies and things like that, and he'll explain from the Vaishnava point of view why this is correct, why this is not correct. There are some which we can accept partially or fully. Pancharatra can be accepted fully. Some parts of Sankhya can be accepted partially. Some parts of yoga can be accepted partially. Right? What can be accepted and what can be rejected? and what is to be criticized, what is to be accepted. So that is a very good book. It's very detailed. It requires, I think I started doing it, lessons on it, but we didn't get into the actual comparison of the different schools. So that's one thing. There's also another book called Sarvadarshan Sangraha, written by an Advaitin, a Mayavadi or an Advaitin, an impersonalist called, I think it's either by Madhavacharya, I think Madhavacharya, but not Madhvacharya. And he's written a book like that too, but from the Advaita point of view. So I don't recommend reading that first, but this one by S.M.S. Chari, which is a translation of Vedanta Deshika's Paramata Bhanga, very good one, like that. But difficult to understand and using a lot of difficult terminology. It needs to be explained. You need to go through it with somebody.
But the Pancha Sanskar, that is initiation. With the brand.
It is initiation.
So basically, it have proper, not just ritualistic initiation into Sri Vaishnavism, to have proper complete initiation, purna total initiation. One must have do full property.
Property is important for moksha.
Yeah.
Property is important for moksha. Property and Pancha Samskara are not the same thing. In the southern school of Sri Vaishnavism, the Sri Rangamacharya, Pilalokacharya, Manavala Mamuni, they talk about the Pancha Samskaras, Tapa, Pundra, Tatonama, Mantra, Yagasya, Pancha Maha, 5 things. Yaga, the last thing. So there's Tapa, the branding, there's Pundra, the Tilak, there's taking a name of a servant of Ramanuja, servant of God, right? Keshava Das, Keshava Ramanuja Das, or whatever you want, however you want to call yourself, to remind you that you're a servant of God, right? The mantras that you get, the 3 mantras, the 3 secret mantras, right? And on top of that, so Tapa Pundra Tato Nama, mantra, Yagasya. Yaga is the 5th one of the Pancha Samskara. Yaga means the Acharya or the teacher will teach you how to worship the deity, will teach you how to worship God, how to approach God, how to pray to God, like that. But Yaga also means, for Tengalite people, it means actually property, to do property, to think that you are a servant of God, like that. Now, one may have already thought he's a servant of God. He may have already understood this, but this is just a formality. So people like Vibhishana, Draupadi, Gajendra, Jatayu, these sort of people, they have already done property. They didn't do Pancha Samskar.
No.
So it's not necessary. It's not necessary for moksha, right? But it comes from Pancharatra. It's a Pancharatric type of initiation, and it includes, according to Tengalais, it includes surrender, right? According to Vadagalais, it is simply approaching the Guru and an entrance into becoming a Sri Vaishnava, but not actual surrender. For that, you have to do a further ceremony called Bharanyasam, and after which you have to promise not to criticize Vaishnavas, eat any food outside your house, or worship any other deities but Sriman Narayana. Okay, and if you do sin again, according to Vedanta Deshika, you have to. If you do sin again purposefully, you have to again do some sort of prayaschitta for that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But that is not necessary in Tengalai Sri Vaishnavism. In Vadagalai Sri Vaishnavism, they consider it necessary. So there's slightly different approaches, but both sides say surrender to God has to be done once and once only.
Om Namo